What if small businesses could also have a legacy? And who would be there to help you? Good morning. My name is Angelina Carleton. I'm the founder and the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, where I look to distill the best practices, positive examples in action, and the best ideas to inspire you. As today's affluent are two-thirds self-made, I hope to invite a variety of guests from many walks of life and income levels to bring you their insights and experiences. These guests range from family office professionals, Hollywood directors, and those in Generation Z, as they each contribute their thought leadership to this subject of legacy. I hope to provide interesting guests who challenge your beliefs with their strong bias towards optimism in how you too can value your life, time, and personal legacy. This morning, I have the pleasure of introducing James Laws. He is the CEO and co-founder of Saturday Drive, a business development firm focused on making the world a better place, one company at a time. Under his leadership and alongside his co-founders, Saturday Drive has launched a wildly popular business such as Ninja Forms, which is a top-rated form builder for WordPress, Send WP, which is a transactional email service, as well as the internationally award-winning coffee shop and roaster, Bond Life Coffee Roasters. Mr. Laws has been leading teams and organizations for over 20 years, as once a pastor and now a business owner. And he gets to put it all together with his 3 circles model. So welcome, James.
Angelina, thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm really excited for this conversation. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Okay, so I did a little bit of research in your background, and you really care about corporate America and the health of the employee. Why do you care?
You know, it's funny, when I started my own business, and I think most small business owners can and entrepreneurs can respond to this. When I started, I was looking for something. I wasn't necessarily looking to be rich, although I wanted to have a sense of financial security, but I ultimately was looking for a flexibility so that I could work when I was best at my work and live my life when it was best to live my life, right? When I wanted to spend time with my family, my friends, my hobbies, all of those, my spirituality, all of those other things. And I found that in the normal corporate world and structure that we have today, that we've kind of set as the norm, that just didn't happen. Well, as I started my business, I started to really look at my team through that same lens. And as I was interviewing people, I started to realize, these people want the exact same thing I wanted when I started my business. And they don't necessarily think that they can have that because they think they're in this kind of grind of just working a job for someone else. And therefore they have to fit within that box of that employer. And if depending on who you work for, that may be true, but I didn't want to be that organization. So we started rethinking how we do work and what does work look like and what does it mean to help team members find fulfillment through their roles, through their careers, as well as their personal lives. And that's kind of what started to drive this.
That's wonderful. So is there any particular story behind this passion?
Well, it's weird when I think back at it, and thinking about the theme of this podcast and legacy. When I look back at it, I think about my parents a lot. My parents were extremely generous people who often kind of gave of their lives for the people around them, whether it was through church or just because they had a passion for young people, especially young singles who are trying to figure out like what was their place in this world and what was dealing with the dating world and all this stuff. And they just really were generous with their time. And so we always had a house full of people all around just talking about whatever, trying to navigate struggles. I remember my dad would constantly go out late at night picking someone up who was in a bad way, in a bad situation, and kind of help them through that. And so I think part of that is just came from my own parents' generosity and giving of their lives, that I kind of I saw how it impacted them. It sounds selfish. When I think about legacy, there's this existential crisis as you get older. You start to think about, man, when I die, like who's going to remember me? Who's going to think about me? Who's going to think about the work that I did? Right?
Sure. It's the idea of you. So it sounds like they cast a vision. They showed you that there could be a better way. And then so you're looking out at corporate America and you're saying, wow, whether it's a public or a private company, we're falling short and we can do better because I know better exists.
Absolutely. And they cast a vision not by teaching me an idea, but by living an example. And I think to start, my goal is to live an example with my business, share that and kind of live that openly with other businesses so they can also see that there's another way of doing business.
That's wonderful. I know that, one of the things that we talk about on this podcast is positive role models, because what you just talked about matters. People have to witness seeing another human being model it more than talking a good talk. So
Yeah.
are there any other leaders, present day or historic, that have inspired you? And again, it's to inspire the listener or the viewer to know that there's an abundance of good examples out there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's funny because when you ask, like, what are the other leaders and people that are good examples out there? A lot of times we go to typical leaders. So I'll give you the typical ones that I think of. There is Andy Stanley, who is a pastor out of Georgia, but he has a podcast on leadership, and he's a brilliant communicator, great at casting vision, and cares deeply for what he does and the people who do it with him. Another one, current author, Patrick Lencioni, is a phenomenal author who I've read every book he's written. I listen to his podcast, and he's an inspiration as well, with great ideas on people first leadership. And then, of course, I talked about my mom and dad. And for me, they're kind of the historic because they're gone. And so they're no longer in my life, but they're still they're a shining example of who I want to be as I continue to, process and journey through this world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And one of the things you've spoken about to me is about people first leadership. So I know that when you look out at small businesses today, as well as corporate America and so forth, you're very passionate about this. So where do you think we're falling short? Is it lack of awareness? I mean, I want to focus in on the problem before we get to visit the remedies.
I think we are caught in this is the way it's always been done, and this is how businesses have to survive to be successful. I think we're still caught in this, and we've gone through this. If you look through generations of history of how we went from the industrial age to now we're in this information age, and we're still in this kind of transition. I think it's the new information age. It's this transition through where we say the way we have done it. One way of thinking about it is this. We say this often, right? What got you here won't get you there, right? Yeah. And what got us in our current work culture and successful in industry and white collar work and information age isn't going to get us to the next level of innovation. What's going to require, and we're seeing it with the Great Resignation, we're seeing it with so many people looking for new opportunities, is that it's not in the traditional office sense anymore. Small businesses and large businesses alike now are moving to a remote culture, being more distributed, being more flexible in the way that they do work. And I think that's where it's headed. But I think the resistance is, I worked at a credit union for 7 or 8 years.
So let me interrupt you for a second. So it sounds like it's coming from the bottom up.
It really is, right? It's I'll be honest, like I look at it, it's my team that leads me in many ways, and they make me aware of where we miss the boat. Now, the challenge is a people first leader hears their team and changes. They get feedback and they change their course. They take it into consideration. They recognize that their team, so long we call Generation Z and millennials like lazy. But I don't think they're lazy, right? I think what they're doing is they're frustrated. They recognize that there's an imbalance in loyalty, right? They're pouring out and being loyal to the corporation, but the corporations are not being loyal to them.
Or
and
the top this is true and the shareholders. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's kind of the shift that's kind of taking place. The young are leading us, and the new workforce is leading us and saying, no, this isn't going to work anymore for us. And so if companies want to continue to succeed, want to continue to have a legacy as a business, they're going to have to shift their management styles. They're going to have to shift their priorities a little bit, and things are going to have to change. But if they don't, they're going to become non-existent. Like their legacies are going to just shrivel up.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that these days. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's amazing to me to see how many corporations to this day and how many leaders, these top line leaders, are now calling people back into the offices when it has been fully demonstrated to them that their teams are actually more productive
and smarter than they may have realized or given them credit for.
Absolutely. And it's just really kind of this broken model of productivity. And I fell into this as well. When I started my business, we started as a co-located on-site team. And I realized my management model was a little more of butts in the seat. Like if I see people sitting in front of their computer, well, then we're being productive, but it doesn't mean we're being productive. It just means there's activity going on, and activity is not the same as productivity, and productivity is not the same as progress, which is what we ultimately want.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more inspiration. Are there some CEOs out there that are doing it right?
I think there are certainly lots of CEOs that are working in the right direction and are trying to do that. I'm not,
Or
as I
companies that
think,
inspire you, or companies you think that are getting it right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, as I look around, I always come back to, I mentioned Andy Stanley and Patrick Lencioni and right in their organizations. And I think they themselves have organizations that are doing it right. You see it a lot more, because it's a people centric, you see it a lot in churches, church leadership trying to refocus and reframe.
Yeah. And I think it's good that we're having this conversation also about churches, because of all the things we've been hearing the last few years about this pastor, we need to bring some good news.
That's right. So there are some churches that are doing well, and I'm not, whether you're religious or not religious doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I come from my past. I came from a church background, and I was a pastor. And it's funny because as I go into business, I realize, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but church is business. You've got a product, you have a customer, you have a CEO, you have all the same components.
Are you showing us what's behind the curtain?
Just a little bit. I think a lot of what I've learned from leadership and business, I learned from leading a church, right? Like you learn how to market. I hate to say it because it's not, and again, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but there is a marketing component. There is a vision casting component. There is a sales component. All of these things exist in a church organization, and they directly transfer into a business situation. The difference is churches that are run well are people focused.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to add to what you were saying. I think you're still dealing with people, and people are people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the that's one of the big points. One of the things we don't think about is our organizations are not our products. Our organizations are not our services. They're not our accounting systems and our HR departments and our marketing. They're people. People make up our business. And if we don't have people who are passionate, purposeful, and feel like they're making progress, then we don't have people who are fulfilled in our companies start to shrivel up. We start to feel it. Our customers start to feel it. And ultimately our bottom line starts to feel it.
Yeah. So let me reframe the question then. Instead of what CEOs out there, maybe I could ask you the question another way. What pastors out there do you think are getting it right?
I am so far out of, I hate to answer this question in this way. I am so far out of the religious circle. Okay. Andy Stanley is one of the only ones that I actually still follow, only because of his leadership content that I feel like bridges both sides of that gamut. So I'm not as connected in. Most of my businesses that I deal with today are small businesses, and the small businesses is where you're seeing an uptick of people first leaders. There's lots of peer businesses around me that are doing it really, really well and care very deeply for their teams. As a matter of fact, I've seen through the pandemic, so many of these small businesses that I know of have lightened their workload, have added additional mental health benefits, have paid out bonuses where they could, all in the hope to take care of their teams in what has been a very challenging and trying time.
Very stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the positive for a moment. Tell me about a great culture, a great small business culture, or what you've seen out there in the landscape.
So ultimately, great business cultures are cultures where there is a great deal of psychological safety. There's a great deal of communication. There's a great deal of mutual respect. And that's what we aim to foster is how do you develop a particular culture where everyone feels like they can speak up, they can be contrarian, they can raise the red flag when they see that there's a challenge coming, and they don't feel like anyone's going to attack them or think less of them for doing that. And fortunately, there's not a lot of businesses where that isn't true, but I think there's more and more businesses that are recognizing, like, we have all heard it said in typical corporate culture, right? I don't pay you to think. So just go do what I told you to do, right? We've heard that. All of us have heard that statement.
Yeah. In other words, know your place.
Right. Every business listening should know this. You absolutely pay your people to think. And if you're not paying your people to think, what are you paying them for? Because it's not to press a button. It's not to pull a lever or to turn a knob, right? You're paying your people to think. And so a good, healthy culture is a culture where you have a lot of thinking people, a lot of communicating people, and a lot of people who respect each other's opinions as they work through those things.
Okay, so let me run a scenario by you, and then I'm going to move on to the next question. So one of the things that I've seen in my coaching practice since I started is millennials and Generation Z, et cetera. And if they are working within a public or a private company, what can oftentimes happen is you have the upper echelon of leadership or management, and then you have everyone below that, and they better not dare argue or challenge or tell the truth, or they will lose their jobs. What
Yeah.
say you?
Well, unfortunately, if you're in an organization like that, that is the stereotypical start of a toxic work culture, right? That is a culture that is, and if it's and if it's at the upper leadership, you have little control to change that environment. So you either have to decide, are you going to buy your time and play the game until you find something else? Or is it worth it to live in that culture for what you get out of that exchange? You can treat your relationship as a worker to an employer as an exchange of time for money. You can do that.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to put up with that, that's fine. But my guess is if it's at the highest leadership level, there's not a lot that can be done honestly, there's not a lot to be changing it. You should get out. You should start looking for those other opportunities. And I wouldn't tell them too soon because they're not going to do you any favors. Wait till you find that thing and then just move.
Yeah. So no wonder more people are becoming entrepreneurial and starting small businesses.
And it's a great way to do it. Now, here's the challenge. Not everyone's meant to start a business. Not everyone necessarily has the aptitude or the constitution for it. Not everyone. It's different skill sets.
Yeah.
Not everyone, when they get to doing it, will, not everyone wants to be their own bookkeeper and their own marketing department and not everybody wants to start a small business and then one day realize, oh, I'm no longer doing the thing I started doing, right? I started being a social media manager and all of a sudden I got so many clients, I had to hire people. And now I'm managing people and I'm not doing social media, which is the thing that I loved, or engineering or graphic design or whatever it is. So you have to kind of decide, what is it that you want to do? What is it ultimately that makes you fulfilled? What is it that makes you happy? And go after that. And there are plenty of businesses that you can work at where you can be happy and not be entrepreneurial. But entrepreneurship is a great way to go.
Yeah. So, you are at a business development company, so you would be a guide that they could go to as they make this transition, correct?
Yeah, I love having conversations with people. Ultimately, what Saturday Drive is it has both an umbrella and has offshoot businesses that have branched off of it on its own. They have their own teams that run their own products, make their own decisions financially. And I may sit on the board of all of those companies, but ultimately my job is to make sure that those teams have a proper operating system, have a proper way of getting the right talent, taking care of that talent, treating the talent fairly, and making sure that we understand that we are all people working together for a common goal. So we develop the inner workings, practices, frameworks, and systems for each of these businesses and help them continue to flourish. And with circles.com, which you talked about a little bit, is our kind of expanding beyond our direct contact, the things that we have our hands in, and reaching out to others to say, here are some of the materials that have helped us grow and transition over time.
That's great, because one of the things I've heard, not just from young adults, but also from women, it's so unfair. Okay, great. So leave and create something new, right? But again, not only does that ask them to be entrepreneurial, which is a very different mindset than being an employee, because you have to sometimes be like the dishwasher and the head janitor and the bottle washer. And when you're first starting out, you have to wear many different hats. And so I like that you're offering your business development company so that they don't feel like they arrive to this new stage and they say, oh my gosh, who is there to help me?
Absolutely. And even if you're just making transition from being an employee in one place to an employee in another, my advice is determine what you really want from an organization. What is your expectation on how an organization treats you? And then pick 4 to 5 companies and really seek out their culture and learn about them and help them see you on their team. You will be able to make a transition from a toxic culture to a healthy culture if you take the time. It may take some time. Just like, when I started my business, I didn't quit my job. I worked for years working a full-time job while I was building my business. I didn't quit my business, quit my job and just start my business. I bootstrapped it slowly through that process. Even just finding a new job, a new career at a healthier place, you can make that same transition. And it's maybe just as entrepreneurial, right? Because you take your time, you do your research, you learn the company, you learn the culture, and then you sell yourself to that company and you get yourself in the door, and you will be happier for it, getting out of what has been probably causing you stress, anxiety, and perhaps, every number of physical health problems.
Sure. And also diminishing the legacy potential of that individual.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before I get into how you might guide a person or a group of people in having honest conversations, who or what gets to keep you accountable?
Well, ultimately, my team keeps me accountable because I talk about all this stuff publicly and I write about it on a website. And if I'm not living up to it within my organization, they call me out because I have hope, for the most part, I think from examples that I've seen anecdotally, I've created enough of a safe environment where if I'm not doing the things that I'm talking about and I'm writing about and I'm sharing, my team will say, hey, what about this? Because that's not something we do, but you're saying everyone else should do it, but we don't even do that. So ultimately my team, but of course my wife keeps me accountable all the time. I have business partners who also keep me accountable and challenge me and in the things that I say. So that tends to be my core circle of people that hold me accountable.
That's wonderful. And I can imagine what you're doing also leads to a better community and a better country and a better world, if I'm thinking about the ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have a group of people who believe that their managers, their team leads, and then their upper leadership all actually care about their well-being and are more interested in them as a person than them as a worker or employee. It's one of those situations where it can get so easy to forget that we work with people. And when you focus on that, it does create a community. It creates a sense of well-being, a sense of peace and tranquility. Because we're not a team, like we don't sell product, we don't serve products, we serve people. We're not after profits, we're after taking care of people. Profits will come if you take care of people properly, right? That'll happen. But we focus on people, our customers, our employee, yeah, right? Law of reciprocity, like it will come back to us if we make sure we focus. That's why one of our core values, one of our chief core values, it's our number 2, because our number 1 is people first. So you can't have people first and have that be like your second core value, because that feels weird. So, but one of our primary core values is always be a cheerleader. And in that is just about putting positive energy into the world. There's so much negative on social media. There's so much negative in the news. There's so much negative everywhere else. I want our team, our leaders, our company to be cheerleaders for everyone. So when a company falls short and screws up and everyone starts piling on and saying how much, they should all just be destroyed and burned to the ground and stuff like that, our team comes in usually and says, hey, we all make mistakes. I get it. Let's figure out how we move past this. Let's pivot. Let's turn this into a success. And you know what? We're all going to go through hard times, but what really matters is what you do when other people go through hard times, because when you go through a hard time, people remember. People remember if you're the person who brings negativity to that situation or you were the cheerleader.
Yeah. Deep stuff. Good. Yeah, absolutely. My husband has a chicken, what is it called, with the hens in the backyard that lay the eggs? And if one chicken has
like a chicken
wound,
coop?
Yeah. Do you know what happens to that one chicken?
No.
The other chickens try to kill it. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
so don't be chickens.
Yeah. So that now I understand the hip hop phrase about chickens and labeling and calling people chickens. Now I finally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's a new perspective of thinking about that. I never knew that. So that definitely is a lot.
Yeah. So I think what you're pointing to is bringing out the good in human nature compared to just an animalistic instinct of, So I think what you're pointing the flashlight is, let's save the good stuff. You had an amazing idea. Maybe it wasn't executed, the best way. You didn't might not have known one element in the marketplace, but let's bring it back to life and bring the hope back in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this in organization. We see this in childhood development. We see this in proper trying to encourage proper employee behavior. If all you constantly do is point out the negative, all the things that someone's doing wrong, you're just going to create more of that. You're going to create an environment where more wrong. But if you can say, hey, great job at this, well, you're going to get more of that. And so you know what I mean? So you focus on the positive, focus on the behaviors you want to see, and downplay the stuff that might have been not ideal. And we'll work on that, but we'll work on it by focusing on the positive behaviors.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So kudos to you, because that takes character.
I appreciate that. It's one of those things where I think it sometimes feels like, well, this is common sense. It's the big breakthroughs, the big things always, when you hear them, you go, man, that seems like that was obvious, but it's not always obvious to get there. Like,
yeah, well,
it takes time.
Yeah, it's not always obvious to people because they have to be ready for it and they have to want it. And so you want goodness. Yes.
I certainly do. I certainly want goodness. I mean, who doesn't, right? Like,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's funny when I think about legacy and why would somebody try to bring good in the world? Why would somebody try to do all these great things? And when I think about legacy, it's in a way, there's a little bit of selfishness involved. It feels good. Man, it feels good to do good for other people. It feels good to affect positive change. No one feels good by doing negative things. You feel worse. Like, why would you want that? Yeah, sociopaths, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. And I appreciate what you're referring to regarding the landscape of which we live, because I think we need to call out the environment. So you had referred to media and how we're being bombarded these days. And I kind of call it fear. And if somebody can shake off the fear, then it can redirect their mind. And I know you're a big proponent of mindset. And so what I see you doing is shifting the mindset.
Yeah, I think it's important with social media and with news. Think about 20 years ago. Think about 30 years ago, how different the environment that we lived in was. Now, were there as much division between Republican and Democrat? Were there much division between the religious and the non-religious? Was there as much division actually, there probably was, right? Because we've always been people who've had strong opinions, but we weren't hearing about it all the time. And it wasn't making us angry and hateful towards people that we would otherwise love. I had to quit Facebook because it was honestly making me dislike people who I otherwise loved, who I cared about, who were meaningful to me. And so I had to just kind of remove myself from the inundation of all the bickering and all the fighting and all the pointing fingers. The only way I could figure out how to solve that problem for me, to help me reprogram my mind, was just to say, I'm shutting it off. I'm just going to stop watching it all.
And create some boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kudos. Okay, so let me ask you one more question about your business, and then we'll get personal with your own legacy.
All right.
So if you were to lead a person or a group of people to fulfillment, how would you do that? Like, what would be the model that you would use? What are some of the cornerstones, et cetera?
I love it. Well, obviously, this is a really important question to me, because one of the things that I developed in the early stages of the pandemic is I started to work through my own fulfillment model. And I started to look at my team and I say, what motivates the team? What makes them feel like they're doing a job that they love to do? What makes them feel like these things matter? And so if you can picture for me for a moment a Venn diagram of 3 circles. So you have these 3 circles that overlap. At the center, what I ultimately want to find for my team is not engagement, because honestly, I don't care how engaged they are. I want to know, are they fulfilled? Are they ultimately fulfilled? Do they ultimately feel like, this is where it started to come down to, like, how do you define fulfillment? Like, how that's different for everyone. And so how do we define it? So I started to create a definition for fulfillment. And I did it by asking 3 questions. And these 3 questions are: 1, do you love what you do? And I want to say, this can apply to work, business area. It can also apply to any area of your life, any area, your family, your anything. You just, you can just reframe it just a little bit and you'll get there. 1, do I love what I do? 2, do I believe what I do matters? And 3, can I see the progress that I am having on what matters. So can I see the progress? Can I believe that? Do I believe it matters? And do I love what I do? And if I can answer 3 of those questions with an affirmative, then I'm probably on the right track of being pretty darn fulfilled. At the end of the day, when I come to the end of my day, I don't feel depleted and worn out and just totally beat up. I look back at the day and I go, this was a good day, and I'm excited to do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. Yeah.
It should be. And it's not that it's not still work, and that sometimes things don't work out the way you want, or the work isn't hard, or sometimes the work doesn't feel like work. But there's a difference when you can answer yes to those questions.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to is there's one form of exhaustion where you're like, hooray, I did an amazing job. I gave it my all. And you like crash into your pillow and you're proud of that day. And then there's another type of exhaustion.
There is, right? There is. Think about the corporate, your corporate office situation where you come home from the work day and you're like, oh, you should work out. I don't have any energy to work out. I don't have anything in me to do anything else. I don't have time to spend with my family. I know my kid wants to play, but I'm just so tired. I just want to sit on the couch and be depleted, right? Yeah. Put that with the difference of you just finished a 5K or a half marathon or a marathon because, and you're a runner and you get to the end of that. And are you tired? Absolutely. But do you feel fantastic because of it? Absolutely. There's a difference between accomplishing something that do you love it? Do you believe it matters? And can you see the impact that you're having? And when you can say yes to those things, and ultimately these 3 things, I've identified those 3 questions as being passion. Do I love it? Purpose. Do I believe it matters? And progress. Can I see my impact? And so those are where those 3 circles overlap and ultimately overlap for fulfillment. And so those are what I call the motivational drivers of fulfillment. And if I can if I can help my team discover purpose, if I can help my team members discover passion, if I can help my team see the progress that they're making, I can help them fashion the role that's perfect for them, and everything else is going to be taken care of.
And it's all by design.
It's by design.
Yeah.
It's a real, to me, it's a really cool model. Now, here's the real challenging part of this. When you talk about fulfillment, helping guide somebody through that. As a leader, I can't give you purpose. I can't manufacture purpose in you. I can't manufacture passion in you. And in many ways, I can't manufacture progress for you. But here's what I can do. And this is the over circles. These are the outer circles. I can give you clarity. I can help you with collaboration and bring the same cause, the same goals, and I can give you connection to that cause and to those people. So ultimately, as a leader, what the levers that I pull in the organization is increased clarity, increased collaboration, increased connection. And if I do those, the team will discover purpose, passion, and progress.
Very good. Very nice. Okay, wonderful. So this is the personal part. What would you like your legacy to be?
I know I see you ask this question, and I think about legacy, and this is a really tough question to ask because I said at the beginning, right? When I think about legacy, I think about that existential crisis of as you get older, you think about, oh, when I die, will anyone remember me? Will anybody remember the things that I did? And then I have to come to the reality of I'm not going to care. When I'm dead, I won't care. I won't know who attended my funeral. I won't know who still talks about my ideas. I won't know who reads my books or, who used my products or any of those things. And for most of us, in reality, legacy lasts 1 to 2 generations for most people. Now that there are some people that stretch beyond that, but most of them, legacy lasts for 1 or 2 generations. So ultimately, what I want my legacy to be is for my son. I want my son to learn what I learned from my parents, to live a generous life, to learn to give a life that is sacrificing, that is about something bigger than themselves, that is about caring for other people. And if I can demonstrate that to him, that he can pass that on to his generation, it doesn't matter that 3 generations from now, it's not my name that's carrying on that legacy. It's not my name's legacy. It's that generosity legacy that carries through. And, 2 generations from now, it'll be my son who everyone's remembering as being generous, right?
Yeah, I might call that an energetic signature.
Yeah, that is fair. And I think that's ultimately what I want, right? Like I am personally not going to care. I certainly, the selfish side of me says, I feel good today. I love the feeling of helping someone navigate a challenging situation, or helping them find fulfillment, or helping them find the role in the company that they love what they're doing and they're passionate about it. I love all of that's going. I love managing teams. I love being a leader. It's hard, but it's worth it for me, because the endorphins and all the stuff that it gives me, I feel good about it. But beyond me, I want my son to learn that. And I want his children to learn that. And I want their children to learn that. And I hope that they just carry on generosity. And I hope that would fracture out to other people and other families, and that generosity would become the norm. Yeah. And not the exception, which sometimes it feels like today, even though I don't know that that's true. I don't want to be the cynic who says, man, we are all mostly selfish. I think we are all mostly generous, but we have to take over more of the selfish terrain that has had too much of a foothold in the world today.
Bravo. Very nice. Well said. Is your son near you in Tennessee, or is he far away somewhere?
I know when you look at me, you might think my son is like an adult. My son is 7.
Oh, okay. Okay.
he turns 8 in a month. And he's young and energetic and hyper, and sometimes I wonder, is anything that I'm saying getting through to him at this age? But no, he's fantastic. But yeah, no, he is with me.
Okay, good. Well, I think you're setting a very good example. If I refer back to that phrase, positive role models again, I think he's definitely absorbing and processing it and watching, what it is that you model in your walk.
Well, I appreciate that, and continue to grow and push forward and give him that example. Yeah.
Any other thoughts that are legacy related regarding companies? Or I kind of thought I'd throw out this, because I know that you've taken some time to think about this question, which means something.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I've said this before in other places, but I think it bears repeating. If you're a small business owner, or you're a large business owner, you're a corporation, one of the fundamental mind shift changes that has to take place, and I think there's a tie back to legacy if we follow that thread long enough, is this idea that you don't deserve employees. There is no intrinsic reason why people should have to or want to work for you. You've got to do the work. You've got to make your job, your culture, your workplace a place people want to work. You have to make it enticing. The people that you hire are actually your customers, right? Your customers, the people you think are your customers, but your team is your customers, and you're developing a product for them. How are you serving that team? How are you making sure their needs are being met? Because if you're not doing that, they're going to find some place that is, and you have to get it through your head. Like, nobody deserves employees. We earn them, and we get the honor of people to work for us because we work hard at serving a product for them.
Well said. Well said. Well, that will just blow the entitlement theory right out of the water.
Absolutely. And as it should.
So what's the best way for someone to reach you if they would like to learn more about your organization?
Well, I obviously have to fix it because we had some back and forth. But if you go to circles.com, that's circles with 2 I's, there is a form on there that you can submit. I have to fix something because I didn't apparently get my notification for that in a correspondence between you and I. But that is a great place. Circles.com is where I do all of my writing on this topic. I have a podcast myself over there called Leading to Fulfillment. And we have a newsletter that we send out every Friday about leadership and managing teams and fulfillment, of stuff we've written, as well as stuff we've curated around the internet, who fit kind of our model and our culture and what we think is healthy. And so we share that all the time. So that's a great place to kind of get in touch with me and learn more about what we're doing.
Awesome. Very nice. Okay. Well, thank you, James, so much regarding what you've brought to today's conversation. I appreciate the possibilities that you are showing, as well as the distinctions about a good culture and a not so good culture regarding settling versus dreaming. I know firsthand that many times employees that leave corporate America, if they need to even just write a legacy plan or legacy goals, they can be petrified to do that, because it's asking them to be brave, whereas they may have slugged through X number of years at some company, and it's not always been the healthiest. And so it's almost like rebuilding their self-worth and self-esteem after they've come through almost like a war zone. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And Angela, thank you so much for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed having this conversation.
Wonderful. So thank you. Thank you again for the work that you're doing. Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
so to close us out, my name is Angelina Carleton. I'm the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself in new wealth or generational wealth, may the content of this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. Thank you so much for joining. Please like and subscribe. And if you're hearing this on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.